at Murray State University, and welcome back to 10 at 10. 10 at 10 is brought to you through a partnership between Murray State University, Grow West, the Technology Council of West Kentucky, KY Innovation, and local partner Sprocket Innovation in Paducah, and the Kentucky Innovation Station in Madisonville. Welcome back to episode 225. We have been talking about cybersecurity best practices over the last several weeks, and today is going to really wrap up that discussion. Now, the things we talk about on 10 at 10 is always, in my opinion, the best practices. These are the things that, whether it's coming from me or it's coming from other cybersecurity experts, these are the things that we need to be doing to keep our organization safe. We started with policy, and we talked about passwords and endpoint detection and security education awareness. We talked about monitoring last time and backups as well. And now we're talking about that ongoing next step, test and assess. And there's a couple of ways that we talk about testing and assessing. There's audits and there's assessments. And then there's actually testing. But the bulk of our time today, we're going to talk about audit and assessment. A lot of people say they want to be compliant with a certain standard, so let's audit against that standard. Okay, yes, that makes perfect sense. I totally understand it. That's great. Here's the reality. If you decide that your organization needs to be compliant with a certain standard, whether it's by requirement or by choice, the first time on your first try, you're not going to be compliant. I almost guarantee it. Maybe there's a rare exception of an organization out there, but most likely you're going to have to do some work to get to that point. Let's say that we want to, follow the CIS 18 controls. That's great. We'll talk about that in a minute. The reality is the first time you're going to try to measure yourself against that, you're not going to meet it. So it might be better to start with something before we actually get to the point of saying, let's audit. So the question is, should you audit or should you assess? And let me kind of dig into that a little bit more. Let's say that you're being required to be compliant with HIPAA or with PCI DSS, and we'll talk about some others in a minute. You may have to do an audit each year regarding those standards. But if not, then maybe we want to do an assessment. So an IT security assessment is either conducted by an internal or third-party team. It's a check in advance of and in preparation for a security audit. So it's a high-level look at compliance. It examines the network security, the disaster recovery, the protections, the general data security, so forth and so on. But what this is really looking at is a high-level compliance. We're not getting into the weeds. But if you're new to implementing security to IT cybersecurity controls in your organization, it probably doesn't make sense to implement or to pay for an audit. An audit is more expensive, but we can start with an assessment. We can start with just let's take a basic look at what we have going on and see where we can help and to grow our organization. On the flip side, an IT audit is conducted by a third-party auditor that is qualified, that is certified. It is a check of compliance with a set of external legal standards or guidelines, and it examines all technology, controls, policies, and procedures. So what they're doing in an audit is that they're looking at the standard that you say you're following, and they're looking at every single item to find things wrong, to say that you're not doing X, Y, Z, A, B, C. You're not doing all of these things. And if you say that you are, then the auditor is going to audit you and say, then prove it. If you say that you're backing up on a daily basis, then restore the backup from December 15th. If you can't, then maybe you're not really doing it. Or maybe you don't back up 6 months worth of information. You only back up 3 months of information. Then that's what you need to say. But if the standard says you have to do it for 6 months and you can't produce the December 15th backup, then that could be a problem. Anyway, there's a lot of ways that we can look at this. An IT audit is necessary to show compliance to a standard, but it is also a lot more expensive than an assessment. So it really depends on what you want to do. Now, there are a ton of frameworks that you could show compliance to. This is an older slide. There's actually a whole lot more than this, but there's HIPAA, there's PCI DSS, there's CCPA, which is a California Consumer Privacy Act. There's GDPR, which is the European Data Privacy Act. There is ISO standards. There's NIST frameworks. There's the CIS controls. There's all of these different things. So what are you auditing? What are you assessing? What are you actually measuring yourself against? Why are you doing it? I had a conversation with someone that talked about no organization in their right mind is going to add compliance unless it is necessary. They're not going to require themselves to be compliant with one of these standards unless it's absolutely necessary, because it's not cheap. It's an expensive undertaking. The ultimate goal of showing compliance is reducing risk. So in HIPAA, we're reducing risk to the patient of their information being stolen. In GDPR, it is protecting the data of the citizens of the European Union. It gives them a lot of data privacy requirements. FERPA, which is the Federal Education Rights Privacy Act, that's education documents. PCI DSS is credit card transactions. There's so many different things. The point is, if you need to show compliance with the standard, which I recommend it on the surface, because this is a good idea to show that you are doing the things that you need to do to keep your organization and your customers' information private. So one of them is the NIST cybersecurity framework. Now we're at the 2.0 version. Again, the framework it's hard to show compliance in a framework. A framework is a framework, but it has controls that you should consider if you're wanting to show compliance. Under identify, actually, let me just show this. Under each of those functions, there's categories, and under each of those categories, there's subcategories. And you can measure yourself on how you are doing in those different subcategories. Highly recommend it. It's a really good idea to do that. It is the NIST cybersecurity framework is from NIST, which is a National Institute for Standards and Technology, but it's a U.S.-based standard. It is based on international standards, but it is a U.S.-based thing. If I go back another slide and you see ISO here in the middle, that is an international standard. NIST is a national standard based on international standards, but it's a national thing. Anyway, you can measure yourself against that. Maybe you don't want to do that. There's some people that will swear by NIST and some people that will swear by the CIS controls. And these are the 18 controls, and they have subcomponents as well for you to examine. Should you do this? Sure. To me, here's the bottom line. If you're not assessing yourself against something, then how do you know your controls are doing their job? If you are just doing it because I'm the smartest person in the room and I'm going to just tell my organization what we need to do, well, if it turns out you're not the smartest person in the room and you recommend something or you fail to recommend something and a data breach happens, then you might be personally liable for what happens. I highly recommend that you have standards to back up your recommendation. That's a really important thing. And then finally, I just threw a bunch of icons on this slide talking about tabletop exercises. Tabletop exercises are where we can actually put into practice some of these things that we're talking about. How well do your incident response plans work? How well do some of your controls work? If we don't actually test it, whether it's talking about it around a tabletop or it's actually truly cutting over and trying to see your backup response, we're not going to be certain how we would respond if that bad thing were to happen to our organization. Anyway, there's a lot to think about, but an ongoing thing has to be a test to test and assess our security controls. And when we find gaps, and we will find gaps, then we want to implement corrections to continually making our organization's security posture at the right level that it needs to be to protect our organization. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And as always, thank you for joining in, and I'll see you next week back here on 10 at 10. Thank you. Bye.